What if I were to unveil a narrative so profoundly controversial, so deliberately obscured, that its echoes have been systematically muted from the hallowed pages of most sacred scriptures? A story whispered in hushed tones through the corridors of apocryphal lore. A chronicle of beings of incandescent power, celestial entities known as the Watchers, angels of formidable rank, who, in an act of audacious cosmic defiance, descended from the Empyrean realms to the nascent earth. Their arrival was not benign. They bore with them gifts of forbidden knowledge, secrets of the universe wrested from the very fabric of creation. And in sharing these, they irrevocably altered the trajectory of human existence, setting our world upon a path unforeseen and fraught with peril. But here, shrouded in the mists of antiquity, lies the central, agonizing mystery. Why did the Almighty, the benevolent Creator, expressly forbid this knowledge in the first place? What made these celestial secrets so irresistibly alluring to fledgling humanity, yet so catastrophically dangerous that they were deemed too volatile for our grasp, kept hidden like a divine Pandora's box? Within the ancient, meticulously preserved folios of the Book of Enoch, a sacred text cherished and safeguarded within the rich spiritual tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, we discover a narrative that dares to illuminate these shadowed questions. The Watchers, Enoch tells us, imparted knowledge that promised humanity dominion, power over the raw forces of nature, mastery of burgeoning technologies, and, most insidiously, the means to exert control and influence over each other. But this empowerment came tethered to a devastating price, an unseen spiritual contract whose terms would unleash corruption, sow chaos like dragon's teeth, and ultimately pave the way for widespread destruction. Tonight, in this deep dive into the often unexplored hinterlands of sacred story, we shall endeavor to unearth the precise nature of this forbidden knowledge. We will explore the divine rationale behind God's profound withholding, seeking to understand the heart of a creator faced with the potential unraveling of his creation. And we will discover, with a clarity that may be unsettling, how the precipitous actions of these fallen angels catastrophically reshaped humanity's path, diverting it from a course of innocent communion to one of self-willed, often destructive ambition. Were these secrets withheld merely to shield a fragile humanity from powers it could not comprehend? Or was there something far deeper, a cosmic balance of unimaginable consequence, hanging precariously in the balance? If your spirit is intrigued by the enigmatic whispers of ancient texts, by the allure of forbidden sagas, and the profound implications of knowledge once deemed too sacred or too dangerous for mortal minds, then I invite you to journey with us. Like, share, and subscribe to Deep Bible Stories. Together, let us plunge into the shadowed narrative of the Watchers, into the heart of the forbidden knowledge that, like a primordial earthquake, reshaped the very bedrock of human destiny. In the hallowed, yet often challenging verses of the Book of Enoch, we are introduced to a celestial order of angels known as the egregoroi in Greek, the Watchers. These were not mere messengers, but beings of immense spiritual stature and power, tasked with a sacred duty to observe, to guide, and perhaps to gently nurture the fledgling human race in its infancy upon the earth. They were celestial guardians, overseers meant to ensure the harmonious unfolding of God's plan for his newest creation. But within this luminous host, a shadow began to stir. These angels, Enoch reveals, did far more than just watch from their celestial perch. Led by a figure of considerable authority and charisma, an archon among their ranks named Semyaza, a faction of these Watchers, 200 in number, a significant and formidable cohort, made a fateful, rebellious decision. Semyaza, whose name itself whispers of infamy, was perhaps once a being of radiant light, his countenance noble, his wisdom profound. Yet, a seed of discontent, a tendril of pride, or perhaps a misguided, arrogant pity for humanity's perceived limitations, began to take root within his celestial heart. He saw humanity, innocent yet unrefined, and perhaps believed he and his companions could accelerate their development, elevate them beyond their divinely ordained pace. Or, as some interpretations suggest, a more primal, less altruistic desire began to burn within them. Under the solemn, binding oath sworn upon Mount Hermon, a peak that would forever bear the stain of their transgression, Semyaza and his cohort descended to earth. Their plan, conceived in the rarefied air of angelic rebellion, was one that would forever shatter the pristine innocence of the early world and alter the course of human history with catastrophic finality. They were driven, Enoch tells us, by an illicit desire for the daughters of men, their beauty captivating these celestial beings who had perhaps grown weary of purely spiritual existence. This desire, coupled with a defiant arrogance against the established divine order, led them to cross boundaries that God, in his infinite wisdom, had meticulously set to protect the integrity of both human and angelic realms. This act of unsanctioned union, this mingling of heavenly and earthly natures, was but the terrible beginning, the first discordant note in a symphony of impending chaos. As these fallen angels integrated themselves into the burgeoning fabric of human lives, taking wives from among mortal women, a profound and unnatural fusion occurred. The initial encounters might have been cloaked in wonder and awe. Imagine primitive humanity, living in simple communion with nature, suddenly confronted by these radiant beings, their knowledge seemingly infinite, their power dazzling. The Watchers, in turn, perhaps initially shared snippets of celestial wisdom, glimpses of cosmic order, simple enchantments, or rudimentary arts, delighting in the rapt attention of their human companions. The women they chose, perhaps initially honored or overwhelmed by such celestial suitors, bore them offspring. And here, the narrative takes a stark and ominous turn with the emergence of the Nephilim. These were the progeny of the Watchers and human women, a hybrid race of giants, beings of immense physical stature and preternatural strength. The term Nephilim, often translated as fallen ones or giants, appears also in Genesis 6-4, hinting at this same ancient, troubling tradition. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. But renown in this context carries a heavy, shadowed connotation. These Nephilim, Enoch describes, were beings of voracious appetite and often brutal disposition. Their sheer size and strength, coupled with a nature untempered by divine grace or true human empathy, made them a terror upon the earth. They consumed the produce of human labor, then turned to devouring humans themselves, and even began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, consuming their flesh and drinking their blood. Their existence was a glaring, monstrous testament to the profound disharmony, the cosmic imbalance wrought by the Watchers' transgression. The very earth began to groan under the weight of their unnatural presence and their insatiable, destructive hunger. The first fruits of forbidden union were not enlightenment, but a terrifying, bloodthirsty aberration, a perversion of God's created order. The Edenic innocence was not merely fractured, it was being devoured. As the Watchers, led by the increasingly audacious Semyaza, solidified their presence among humanity, their initial, perhaps tentative, interactions evolved into a deliberate and systematic dissemination of what the Book of Enoch terms forbidden knowledge. Having crossed the Rubicon of divine law by cohabiting with mortal women and fathering the monstrous Nephilim, there was, it seemed, no turning back, no secret too sacred to unveil. The awe and naive wonder with which humanity first greeted these celestial beings soon gave way to an insatiable and ultimately dangerous curiosity. The Watchers, in turn, perhaps fueled by a mixture of pride in their superior understanding, a desire to bind humanity ever closer to themselves, or even a malicious intent to disrupt God's carefully laid plans, began to unlock the celestial Pandora's box, showering mankind with secrets wrested from the heavens and the hidden workings of the earth. The process of this knowledge transfer was likely gradual, yet its impact was swift and transformative. Imagine small, scattered communities, their lives dictated by the rhythms of nature, their understanding of the world shaped by simple observation and oral tradition, suddenly being exposed to concepts and techniques far beyond their natural ken. Semyaza himself, Enoch records, taught enchantments and root cuttings, revealing the occult properties of plants and the means to harness unseen energies, a power that could heal but also curse and manipulate. Azazel, another prominent leader among the fallen, and perhaps one of the most culpable, taught men the art of making swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. He revealed to them the secrets of metals and how to work them, a skill that could forge a plowshare, but far more readily, a spear. He also, chillingly, taught them about the ornaments of the eyes, cosmetics, particularly kohl, the art of beautifying the eyelids, and the selection of precious stones and all sorts of dyeing tinctures. This seemingly innocuous knowledge of adornment was linked to seduction, vanity, and the stirring of illicit desires, further corrupting human relationships. The Book of Enoch meticulously, almost like a grim inventory, lists the specific categories of these forbidden teachings, each one a thread in the unraveling tapestry of human innocence. The Watchers, a pantheon of renegade instructors, imparted a wide array of skills, metallurgy and weaponry. This was perhaps the most immediately impactful. The scene shifts from simple stone tools to the fiery forge, the clang of hammer on anvil. Humanity, once largely defenseless or reliant on rudimentary implements, now possessed the means to create instruments of war and unprecedented destruction. The gleam of a newly sharpened sword held a terrible allure, promising power, dominance, and the ability to impose one's will through violence. The knowledge of bronze and iron was a double-edged gift, capable of advancing civilization, but also of unleashing its darkest impulses. Sorcery, enchantments, and magical arts. This delved into the manipulation of natural and supernatural realms. The Watchers revealed incantations, spells, the binding of spirits, and divination. Humanity was introduced to the seductive idea of bending reality to their will, of communing with and commanding unseen forces. The line between reverent spirituality and manipulative occultism blurred, then shattered. The quiet awe of nature was replaced by a desire to control it through arcane rituals. Astrology and the secrets of celestial bodies. While observing the stars for navigation or agricultural cycles was one thing, the Watchers unveiled a deeper, more perilous understanding. The interpretation of celestial portents, the belief that human destiny was written in the stars and could be deciphered, even manipulated. This fostered a fatalistic worldview, or conversely, an arrogant belief in one's ability to control fate, supplanting trust in a sovereign personal God with a reliance on impersonal cosmic forces. The wonder of God's vast creation was twisted into a tool for prognostication and self-determination, divorced from divine guidance. Knowledge of the signs of the earth, Sunday, and moon. This likely encompassed advanced meteorological knowledge, understanding of earthly phenomena, and perhaps even geological secrets. While seemingly beneficial for agriculture or predicting natural events, it could also foster a sense of mastery over creation that diminished humanity's dependence on God's providence and timing. Advanced herbalism and potions. Beyond simple root cuttings, this involved the creation of powerful potions, elixirs that could grant unnatural strength, induce altered states of consciousness, or even be used as subtle poisons. The sacred knowledge of plant properties, once perhaps used for healing within divine limits, was perverted into a means of manipulation and unnatural enhancement, challenging the God-given boundaries of life and health. The arts of deception and seduction. This went beyond mere cosmetics. It involved understanding human psychology in a manipulative way, the art of crafting alluring illusions, eloquent but deceitful speech, and the means to exploit human weaknesses for personal gain or to sow discord. The simplicity of truthful interaction was corroded by calculated artifice. Each individual piece of this newly acquired knowledge, when viewed in isolation, might have appeared harmless, even a boon to human progress. A sharper tool, a more effective remedy, a beautiful ornament, a deeper understanding of the seasons. What harm could these possibly hold? But the Watchers were not imparting these secrets with benevolent intent or divine sanction. Their knowledge was unfiltered by God's wisdom, untempered by spiritual maturity, and unguided by a framework of ethical responsibility. Taken together, these teachings became a potent cocktail of corruption, a toolkit for amplifying humanity's latent capacity for evil. The humans, who once lived in a state of relative simplicity, their needs met through direct labor and a perhaps unconscious reliance on the rhythms established by their Creator, now possessed the means to dominate, to deceive, to wage sophisticated warfare, and to destroy on an unprecedented scale. And with this influx of power, this sudden, intoxicating expansion of capability, came an insidious, creeping arrogance. A belief began to fester in the human heart. A belief that humanity, armed with these celestial secrets, could rival divine wisdom, could chart its own course, could become masters of its own destiny, independent of, and perhaps even in defiance of, God's gentle guidance. The forbidden fruit, once tasted, proved addictive, its flavor a mixture of exhilarating power and slow-acting spiritual poison. The humble awe of creature before Creator was being inexorably eroded, replaced by the hubris of a species that had suddenly been handed the keys to a kingdom it was utterly unprepared to govern. The initial spark of shared knowledge had ignited a wildfire of uncontrolled ambition and spiritual decay. The infusion of forbidden knowledge, like a potent spiritual contagion, did not remain a mere intellectual acquisition within the minds of humanity. It swiftly, inexorably, began to manifest in their actions, reshape their societies, and corrupt the very core of their being. The simplicity, and perhaps even the naive innocence that characterized early human existence, began to erode, replaced by a complex and increasingly sinister landscape of ambition, deceit, and violence. The Watchers' teachings, intended or not, had unlocked not a golden age of enlightenment, but a Pandora's box of human fallibility, amplified by powers far beyond their moral capacity to manage. The transformation in human character was profound and terrifying. Where once there might have been a natural dependence on the Creator for sustenance and guidance, a sense of awe before the mysteries of the natural world, now a chilling self-reliance and a grasping desire for dominion took root. Armed with the secrets of metallurgy, men no longer looked to God for protection but to the sharpness of their own swords. Possessing the arcane arts of enchantment and sorcery, they sought to manipulate the spiritual and material realms to their own ends, bypassing the need for prayer or divine favor. Understanding the movements of celestial bodies, they began to chart their destinies according to stellar configurations, diminishing their trust in a personal, providential God. This creeping arrogance, this belief that humanity, empowered by these new, potent tools, could not only survive but thrive independently of divine wisdom, became a defining characteristic of the age. The subtle whisper of the serpent in Eden, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil," found a new, amplified echo. Humanity, intoxicated by its newfound capabilities, began to believe it could indeed rival the divine, constructing its own towers of Babel, not just from brick and mortar, but from forbidden celestial secrets. The fragile bond of humility and gratitude that once connected creature to Creator frayed and then snapped. The sacred text of Genesis, though more concise than the detailed apocalyptic visions of Enoch, bears powerful witness to this precipitous decline. In Genesis 6, verse 5, we find a stark and heartbreaking divine assessment of humanity's condition. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. This is not a description of occasional missteps or minor moral failings. It is a depiction of pervasive, systemic corruption, a spiritual malignancy that had infected the very wellspring of human thought and motivation. Every inclination, only evil, all the time. The language is absolute, conveying a totality of depravity that is almost incomprehensible. This divine observation serves as a chilling biblical corroboration of the devastating impact of the Watcher's illicit tutelage, as detailed in Enoch. The forbidden knowledge had taken deep root, and its fruits were bitter indeed, spreading like a virulent plague of sin and moral decay across the face of the earth. Humanity, now armed with powers it was never meant to wield without divine guidance, found itself on a swift and terrifying trajectory towards self-destruction. The once cherished laws of God, whether explicitly revealed or intuitively understood through conscience and the observation of natural order, were increasingly disregarded, then openly flouted. The delicate, sacred balance between the heavenly and earthly realms, a harmony maintained by obedience and reverence, was shattered. The Watchers, by sharing these secrets without divine sanction, had effectively handed unsupervised children loaded weapons and complex, dangerous machinery. The inevitable outcome was chaos. The societal fabric began to unravel. Conflicts, perhaps once minor skirmishes over resources, escalated into organized, brutal warfare, fueled by the newly acquired knowledge of weapon making. Trust between individuals and communities eroded, replaced by suspicion, deceit, and the ruthless pursuit of power. Those who mastered the magical arts used their knowledge not for communal good, but for personal gain, for manipulation, and to inspire fear. The Nephilim, the monstrous offspring of the Watchers and human women, exacerbated this descent into chaos. Their gigantic forms and voracious appetites became a constant drain on human resources, leading to famine and desperation. Their inherent strength, untempered by morality, made them formidable oppressors, their actions often characterized by brutality and a flagrant disregard for any law, human or divine. Enoch paints a grim picture of these giants consuming all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. They began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. The earth itself, Enoch laments, made accusation against the lawless ones. Indeed, the corruption was not confined to human interactions. The very earth, God's pristine creation, began to suffer under the weight of human wickedness and the unnatural influence of the fallen. The pursuit of metals might have led to rapacious mining, scarring the land. The practice of certain sorceries could have involved the perversion of natural elements or the defilement of sacred places. The rampant violence and bloodshed literally stained the ground. The harmony of Eden was a distant, almost forgotten memory, replaced by a world groaning under the burden of sin, a creation crying out against the tyranny of its fallen stewards and their celestial misguides. This period witnessed the rise of factions and divisions within humanity, exacerbated by the uneven distribution or application of the forbidden knowledge. Perhaps some tribes or individuals were favored by certain Watchers, receiving more potent secrets, leading to imbalances of power, jealousy, and bitter rivalries. Those who possessed the secrets of warfare sought to dominate those who did not. Those who wielded magical arts might have been both feared and sought after, creating new hierarchies based on occult power rather than wisdom or righteousness. The Nephilim, a class unto themselves, undoubtedly used their superior strength to carve out domains of terror. The shared human identity, rooted in their common creation by God, fractured into competing interests, all vying for power and resources in a world rapidly descending into a state of anarchic self-interest. The beautiful tapestry of early human society was being torn to shreds, thread by bloody thread. The catastrophic descent of humanity into a vortex of wickedness, a maelstrom directly fueled by the Watcher's illicit and intoxicating revelations, compels us to pause and confront the central, pivotal question that beats like a somber drum throughout this ancient narrative. What was it, precisely, about these specific teachings, this corpus of forbidden knowledge, that God, in his infinite and unfathomable wisdom, and out of a love that transcends our limited understanding, deemed so profoundly dangerous, so utterly detrimental to the delicate fabric of his burgeoning creation? Why would a benevolent creator, the very architect of existence, who fashioned all things in intricate beauty and presumably desired the flourishing of his every creature, consciously restrict access to certain avenues of understanding, certain corridors of power? The Book of Enoch, far from portraying God as an arbitrary celestial gatekeeper, jealously hoarding his divine prerogatives, suggests a far more poignant and protective rationale. His prohibitions, it seems, stemmed from a deep, preemptive, and fiercely protective love, coupled with a perfect, prescient understanding of the inherent fragilities of human nature and the cataclysmic perils of premature or unsanctioned empowerment. The forbidden knowledge so eagerly shared by the fallen angels was, as Enoch meticulously describes it, a phenomenon far removed from the gentle, organic unfolding of wisdom that might be gleaned through patient observation of the natural world, through diligent, humble study, or through divine inspiration sought in moments of quiet communion. It was, in its devastating essence, a perilous shortcut to raw power, a sudden, overwhelming unveiling of cosmic mechanics and spiritual potencies that humanity, in its nascent, vulnerable stage of moral and spiritual development, was utterly, tragically unprepared to handle. This knowledge, and this is a crucial distinction, did not primarily impart true wisdom, which is always intertwined with humility, responsibility, and love, but instead conferred an intoxicating and profoundly deceptive illusion of absolute control. It offered the tantalizing prospect of dominion over the untamed forces of nature, the seductive idea of charting and manipulating the course of individual and collective destiny, the perilous ability to dabble in the intricate workings of the spiritual realm, and, perhaps most insidiously and corrosively, the means to exert manipulative control over fellow human beings. God, in his omniscient gaze that pierces through the veils of time and circumstance, understood with perfect clarity that such power, divorced from the essential, non-negotiable anchors of divine accountability, profound spiritual maturity, and selfless agape love, would inevitably, inexorably, lead humanity down a treacherous, precipitous path. This path was paved with the cobblestones of burgeoning pride, leading to valleys of systemic corruption and culminating in the abyss of devastating, self-inflicted destruction. His restrictions, therefore, were not born of a capricious desire to keep humanity in a state of perpetual ignorant bliss or to arbitrarily limit their potential. Rather, they were instituted as a sacred shield, a divine quarantine, to protect them from burdens they could not yet ethically bear, from temptations they could not yet spiritually resist, and from consequences that would unravel the very created order he had so lovingly established. Let us delve deeper into the specific character of this forbidden knowledge, not as a mere list, but as interconnected threads in a tapestry of unfolding disaster, and analyze, through the compassionate lens of divine wisdom, their inherent, multifaceted dangers. The impartation of skills in weapon making and the brutal arts of warfare was perhaps the most immediately and visibly destructive of these celestial revelations. Imagine a world where conflicts, though perhaps present in nascent forms, were largely localized, fought with rudimentary tools, born of necessity rather than sophisticated design, and perhaps more easily resolved or contained by communal wisdom or physical limitation. Into this relatively primitive arena, the Watchers introduced the transformative, terrible knowledge of metallurgy, the secrets of smelting ores, forging metals, and crafting them into swords of terrible sharpness, spears of deadly efficacy, shields for impenetrable defense, and breastplates to armor the heart against compassion as much as against attack. This quantum leap in martial technology instantly transformed the very nature and scale of human aggression. It fostered a martial spirit where previously there might have been a more pastoral one, cultivating a dangerous reliance on brute force and a chilling belief in the ultimate efficacy of violence to achieve one's desires and settle disputes. This newfound power brought with it a deceptive, intoxicating sense of security and dominance for those individuals or tribes who mastered it, and a terrifying, existential vulnerability for those who did not. It inexorably bred a culture where might was increasingly perceived as right, leading ambitious leaders and covetous groups to believe they could control the very levers of life and death, seizing coveted resources, enslaving weaker neighbors, and imposing their will upon others through the terrifying logic of bloodshed and conquest. God's original desire, one can infer, was for humanity to learn to live in peace, to cultivate justice, to resolve their inevitable disputes through wisdom, dialogue, and mutual respect, and to ultimately rely on His divine protection and provision. The sudden, unsanctioned introduction of advanced weaponry catastrophically short-circuited this divine ideal, plunging the nascent world into an escalating, terrifying cycle of violence, fear, and retaliatory destruction. Then there were the seductive and perilous arts of enchantments, magic, and the esoteric manipulation of the natural and spiritual worlds. This category of forbidden knowledge tempted humanity away from a relationship of simple trust and humble dependence on God, towards the shadowy allure of occult power and mystical influence. By learning, or believing they had learned, to purportedly control the elements of the unseen world, to conjure or bind spirits, to utter words of power, or to cast spells that could allegedly alter reality, people became ensnared by potent illusions of personal, godlike agency. They began to believe they could bend the very fabric of existence to their individual will, circumvent natural laws that God had established, or gain unfair, supernatural advantages over their fellows. This unsanctioned knowledge flung open a Pandora's box, leading to the proliferation of sorcery, the dark arts of divination, the chilling practice of necromancy, and perilous, unsanctioned contact with malevolent spiritual forces that were never intended to directly influence or interfere with the delicate ecosystem of human life. The sacred text of Deuteronomy, in its 18th chapter, verses 10 through 12, echoes with God's unambiguous and solemn warning against such deeply corrosive practices. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. God, in His foreknowledge, understood that seeking power and control through these forbidden occult means would only lead humanity further and further away from His loving presence, entangling them in a treacherous, shadowy world of spiritual deception, paralyzing fear, and ultimately dangerous spiritual bondage to forces they could neither truly understand nor ultimately control. Furthermore, the Watchers, as Enoch meticulously records, shared the intricate and often misinterpreted secrets of astrology and the complex interpretation of celestial bodies. They taught humanity how to read the intricate movements of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the distant stars, not merely for agricultural timing or navigational aid, but in a perilous attempt to discern hidden patterns, predict future events, and even manipulate or control their own individual and collective destinies. While the reverent, humble study of God's magnificent creation, including the awe-inspiring expanse of the heavens, can indeed serve to reveal His unimaginable glory, His intricate design, and inspire profound worship, as the 19th Psalm so beautifully proclaims, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands." The Watcher's particular brand of celestial teaching twisted this potential for wonder into a dangerous form of fatalistic divination, or, conversely, an arrogant, manipulative prognostication. It subtly, yet powerfully, began to replace humble, childlike trust in God's sovereign, overarching plan and His deeply personal, loving providence with either an illusory, self-aggrandizing sense of control over fate or a fearful, paralyzing submission to impersonal, inscrutable cosmic decrees. Humanity, in its spiritual immaturity, began to transfer its faith from the personal, loving, and interactive Creator Himself to the silent, cyclical patterns of stars and planets. The prophet Isaiah, in the 47th chapter of his book, verses 13 to 14, delivers God's sharp rebuke to those who foolishly and futilely turn to the stars for guidance and ultimate salvation. All the counsel you have received has only worn you out. Let your astrologers come forward, those stargazers who make predictions month by month. Let them save you from what is coming upon you. They cannot even save themselves from the power of the flame. The specific celestial knowledge shared by the Watchers in this domain dangerously encouraged a spiritual autonomy, a self-reliance that actively and tragically distanced humanity from the wellspring of God's true wisdom, His boundless love, and His constant, active, guiding involvement in their lives and in the unfolding story of creation. The overarching, unifying theme in God's solemn prohibition of this diverse corpus of knowledge was His profound understanding of humanity's acute and inherent vulnerability to the insidious spiritual poison of pride. Each individual piece of this forbidden wisdom, while offering a tantalizing semblance of newfound power, enhanced understanding, or heightened capability, carried within its very essence the subtle, yet potent, seed of arrogance. The ability to skillfully forge a sword could easily lead to the overweening pride of the invincible warrior. The perceived ability to cast a potent spell or command an unseen entity could swiftly inflate the ego, leading to the dangerous pride of the manipulative sorcerer. The belief that one could accurately read the celestial tapestry and thereby unlock the secrets of the future could foster the profound pride of the diviner who believed they held the very keys to destiny itself. This spiritual pride, this insidious exaltation of self, and an overestimation of human capability, stands in stark, irreconcilable opposition to the humble, trusting, and dependent relationship that God, in His love, desires to cultivate with His human creation. In His deep and perfect wisdom, God understood with absolute clarity that certain categories of knowledge, certain potencies of power, would only bring catastrophic, widespread harm if they were not accompanied by and filtered through the requisite moral maturity, profound spiritual discernment, and selfless, sacrificial humility necessary to handle them with genuine responsibility and loving care. The Watcher's forbidden teachings, tragically and catastrophically, offered seductive power without the anchor of true responsibility, alluring knowledge without the compass of genuine wisdom, and the intoxicating prospect of far-reaching influence without the crucial, indispensable counterbalance of deep, heartfelt humility. This knowledge, therefore, was kept from humanity not as an arbitrary, punitive restriction imposed by a jealous or controlling deity, but as a profound, far-sighted act of divine protection orchestrated by a loving, grieving Father who knew, with heartbreaking certainty, the inherent weaknesses, the spiritual immaturity, and the profound vulnerability of his beloved human children. God's ultimate, unwavering desire was, and always has been, for humanity to discover its truest, most lasting fulfillment, its deepest, unshakable security, and its most profound, resilient joy, not in the fleeting, false promises of unsanctioned power, nor in the perilous pursuit of forbidden knowledge, but in a vibrant, dynamic relationship of loving reliance upon him, guided by his perfect, life-giving wisdom and enveloped in the boundless safety of his unfailing, covenantal love. But the lure of the forbidden had proven too potent, the serpent's deception too subtle and alluring, and the damage, as humanity eagerly and foolishly embraced these perilous celestial gifts, was already deeply, irrevocably done. The intoxicating taste of unsanctioned power, once experienced, proved a difficult, insidious addiction to overcome, placing them firmly and tragically on a path that led ever further away from the light of their Creator and deeper into the encroaching shadows of their own corrupted desires and ambitions. The forbidden knowledge, imparted by the rebellious Watchers, did not merely expand human understanding in a benign, academic sense. It acted more like a virulent, fast-acting poison, seeping insidiously into every artery and vein of nascent human society. It corrupted hearts, ignited dormant desires for power and domination, and fundamentally, catastrophically, altered the way humanity interacted with each other, with the natural world, and ultimately, with their distant, grieved Creator. What might have been envisioned by some Watchers as an act of upliftment, or by humanity as a gateway to a new golden age, rapidly devolved into a chaotic free-for-all, where the newly acquired powers were wielded not with wisdom and restraint, but with reckless abandon and burgeoning malevolence. Instead of using these celestial insights to build harmony, to foster community, or to offer worship to the giver of all good things, humanity, in its spiritual immaturity and moral frailty, began to use this forbidden arsenal to tear itself and its world apart. One of the devastating and immediate effects of this unsanctioned knowledge was the horrifying rise of endemic, unending violence. Once human hands learned the dark art of weapon-making from Azazel and his cohort, forging bronze and iron into instruments of death, the very perception of their fellow beings began to shift. They no longer saw each other primarily as brothers and sisters under a common father, but increasingly as rivals, as obstacles, as potential enemies to be subdued or eliminated. The fields that once yielded grain through patient toil now became battlegrounds. The simple shepherd's staff was overshadowed by the gleaming spear. Armed with swords that could cleave flesh, shields that could deflect blows, and the terrible knowledge of organized warfare, individuals, tribes, and nascent kingdoms became consumed by the intoxicating, corrosive desire to conquer, to control territory, to subjugate others, and to amass spoils. The Book of Enoch paints a vivid, brutal picture of how bloodshed spread like a contagion across the earth as this violence escalated. Peace, if it had ever truly existed in a perfect state, became a distant, almost unimaginable memory. Genesis chapter 6, verses 11 to 12, though starkly concise, powerfully reflects this devastation. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. Humanity had tragically turned the very knowledge that could have advanced their material well-being, the understanding of metals, the ability to craft tools, into instruments of mutual destruction. The earth itself, once a garden of divine delight, began to suffer, its soil soaked with innocent blood, its tranquility shattered by the constant clamor of war. The cries of the oppressed and the dying ascended to a silent heaven, a terrible indictment of humanity's fall from grace. But the impact of the forbidden knowledge extended far beyond the realm of physical violence, seeping into the spiritual and moral core of human existence. The teachings of magic, enchantments, and sorcery, revealed by Semyaza, Hermione, and others, introduced humanity to the seductive allure of supernatural power divorced from divine sanction. People became obsessed with the idea of controlling forces they did not and could not fully understand, leading to widespread deception, cunning manipulation, and a profound spiritual decay. Instead of seeking wisdom, guidance, and solace from a loving God through prayer and obedience, humanity began to seek quick fixes, hidden advantages, and illicit power from dark, unseen entities and arcane practices. This opened dangerous spiritual doorways to forces that would only serve to further distance them from the divine light, entangling them in webs of fear, superstition, and spiritual bondage. The Book of Enoch describes in harrowing detail how these occult practices brought about a deep moral and spiritual corruption. Humanity began to enthusiastically embrace sorcery and divination, placing their trust in mystical charms, potent spells, and the interpretation of omens to alter reality according to their selfish desires. As people became more deeply entrenched in these shadowy practices, their sense of humility before God, their natural dependence on His providence, began to fade, replaced by an inflated sense of self-importance and a dangerous pride in their supposed mastery over the unseen. They became entrapped in a deepening web of spiritual darkness that clouded their judgment, perverted their affections, and led them ever further away from the life-giving light of their Creator. The pursuit of hidden power became a consuming obsession, a spiritual addiction that promised enlightenment but delivered only deeper shades of night. The knowledge of astrology, another perilous gift from the watchers like Kokobel, further compounded this spiritual alienation. It gave humanity the intoxicating illusion that they could discern, predict, and even control their destinies by meticulously reading the movements and conjunctions of the stars and planets. Instead of placing their faith and their future in God's loving, sovereign plan, people began to rely on the impersonal, cyclical movements of celestial bodies, effectively placing their fate in the hands of the created cosmos rather than in the hands of the personal, caring Creator. This fundamental shift in allegiance led to a culture of fatalism for some, where human agency was seen as subservient to astrological decrees, and a dangerous overconfidence in human predictive ability for others. Both outcomes served to diminish the role of God's active guidance and His call to responsible moral choice. This overconfidence in human control, this belief that they could govern their own lives and chart their own futures without reference to divine authority, fostered a world increasingly marked by profound arrogance and spiritual pride. The wisdom of Proverbs 16:18 echoes with timeless relevance. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. In their misguided attempt to seize control of their own existence, humanity had unwittingly, tragically, placed themselves on a collision course with self-destruction, blind to the profound wisdom and loving protection offered within the boundaries of God's commandments and His benevolent design. This corrupted knowledge, this poisoned chalice offered by fallen angels, created a world spiraling inexorably into darkness. A world where violence was endemic, deception was rampant, and arrogance flourished, unchecked. The Book of Enoch paints a vivid, tragic panorama of how this forbidden knowledge did not, as perhaps some naive humans initially hoped, bring genuine enlightenment or lasting progress. Instead, it inexorably led to profound moral decay, the disintegration of societal cohesion, and the widespread collapse of spiritual understanding. Humanity, lost in a bewildering maze of unsanctioned power and blinding pride, began to walk further and further away from God, their Creator, their Sustainer, and the sole source of true, life-giving wisdom. And the earth itself, no longer a passive observer, began to cry out. The unnatural energies unleashed by sorcery, the constant defilement of bloodshed, and perhaps even the reckless exploitation of resources taught by the Watchers, began to take their toll. Enoch speaks of the groaning of creation, a profound disharmony that mirrored the dissonance in the human soul. The very elements seemed to recoil from the perversion of their intended purpose. The forbidden knowledge had not only corrupted humanity, but had also begun to poison the wellsprings of life on the planet, a chilling foreshadowing of ecological crises born of unchecked human ambition in later ages. The ripple effects of the Watchers' rebellion were proving to be far more extensive and devastating than perhaps even they, in their celestial arrogance, had initially conceived. But God, the divine watcher over all watchers, the ultimate sovereign of a creation now teetering on the brink of utter self-annihilation, would not allow this catastrophic descent to continue unchecked, to spiral endlessly into an abyss of irredeemable darkness. As humanity, under the insidious influence of the forbidden knowledge and the malevolent guidance of the fallen angels, plunged ever deeper into chaos, systemic corruption, and relentless violence, the Creator looked upon the world he had fashioned with such love and declared good, and his divine heart, if we may use such anthropomorphic language to grasp an infinite sorrow, was profoundly grieved. The Book of Enoch, alongside the canonical scriptures, paints a poignant picture of a creator, not as a distant, impassive deity, but as one intimately invested in his creation, a father wounded by the rebellion of his children, both angelic and human. God saw that the only pathway to restore balance, to stanch the bleeding of a world hemorrhaging righteousness, and to offer humanity a chance at redemption, was through a drastic, almost unimaginable, divine act of cleansing. According to the Book of Enoch, God's sorrow was immense, his disappointment acute, as he beheld the state of humanity. They had become hopelessly entangled in a complex web of wickedness and open rebellion, a grotesque caricature of the innocence and joyful communion in which they were originally created. The world, once a testament to his glory, was now overrun with brutal violence, pervasive spiritual corruption, and an unyielding, defiant pride. All direct, bitter fruits of the forbidden knowledge, so recklessly shared by the fallen angels, and so eagerly, disastrously embraced by mankind. The Book of Genesis, in its 6th chapter, verses 5 through 6, provides a stark and deeply moving echo of this divine grief. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. The word regretted here, Hebrew nachem, carries a profound weight, suggesting not a change of mind as if God had made a mistake, but a deep, sorrowful lament, a divine sigh over the tragic turn of events. It reflects the immense depth of the corruption that had saturated his creation, a world that had tragically lost its way, a humanity driven by powers it could not control and intoxicated by knowledge it could not ethically bear. God's response to this almost universal depravity, as both Enoch and Genesis recount, was both decisive and, in its ultimate aim, compassionate. This response was a judgment of immense scale, yet one that sought not merely to punish, but to purify, to cleanse, to reset. He decreed the great flood, a cataclysmic deluge of water that would wash the earth clean of its pervasive defilement, reset humanity on a path towards renewed innocence, and re-establish a relationship of humble dependence on him. But the Book of Enoch adds a crucial, often overlooked layer to this ancient story of divine judgment, explaining that God's decree was directed not solely at a corrupted humanity, but with equal, if not greater, severity at the original instigators of this descent into darkness, the fallen angels, the Watchers who had so flagrantly abandoned their celestial station and betrayed their sacred trust. In the detailed narratives of Enoch, God dispatches his holy archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, to carry out specific aspects of this complex, multifaceted divine judgment. Each of these celestial emissaries, loyal and mighty, had a distinct role in managing the catastrophic consequences of the Watchers' rebellion and in preparing the way for the Earth's cleansing. For instance, the Archangel Michael, renowned for his power and loyalty, was specifically tasked, according to Enoch, with binding Semyaza and his rebellious associates. They were to be cast into chains of everlasting darkness, condemned to an abyss, a place of confinement deep within the earth, where they would await the final, ultimate judgment at the end of days. This decisive act served a dual purpose. It was a just punishment for the Watchers' heinous rebellion and their defilement of both heavenly and earthly realms, and it was a necessary containment of the overwhelming evil and spiritual corruption they had unleashed upon the world. The direct, polluting influence of these powerful, malevolent beings needed to be severed. The Apostle Jude, in his New Testament epistle, verse 6, strikingly echoes this ancient Enochic tradition regarding the fate of these fallen angels. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Through this decisive divine intervention, God took definitive steps to quarantine the spiritual contagion that had spread like wildfire across the earth, ensuring that the direct, overwhelming influence of the Watchers would not persist indefinitely, poisoning future generations. The Archangel Raphael, whose name means God heals, was given the task of healing the earth from the defilement and announcing the coming deluge so that a remnant might escape. He was also, according to some interpretations of Enoch, involved in the binding of Azazel, one of the chief corruptors, who was to be cast into utter darkness in the desert, his face covered, until the great day of judgment, when he would be cast into the fire. Gabriel, the strength of God, was commanded to go against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication and the children of the Watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. This grim decree addressed the unnatural and destructive presence of the Nephilim, ensuring that this hybrid race, a living symbol of cosmic disorder, would largely perish before or during the flood, preventing their continued oppression and corruption of humanity. Uriel, the fire of God, or light of God, was sent to Noah, the son of Lamech, to warn him of the impending cataclysm and to instruct him on how to escape the destruction with his family, thereby preserving a righteous lineage through which humanity could be reborn. The Great Flood, therefore, was far more than a mere act of punitive destruction. It was a profound, divine reset button, a painful but necessary surgery to remove a terminal cancer from the body of creation. It was an opportunity for humanity, through Noah's righteous line, to return to a state of relative purity, free from the overwhelming, direct influence of the Watchers and the immediate, crushing burden of the forbidden knowledge that had led to its near-total downfall. In preserving Noah and his family, God demonstrated his unwavering commitment to a righteous remnant, his enduring love for his creation, and his ultimate plan for redemption, ensuring that humanity would survive and be given a new beginning. Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, describes Noah as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God, a stark contrast to the pervasive wickedness surrounding him, and a testament to the kind of purity and faithful relationship God sought to restore on earth. Through the cataclysmic waters of the flood, God not only cleansed the physical world of its accumulated violence and moral filth, but also decisively re-established the sacred boundaries between the spiritual and earthly realms, boundaries that the Watchers had so arrogantly and disastrously violated. This divine reset would allow humanity to start anew on a cleaner slate, hopefully chastened by the memory of the cataclysm and free, at least for a time, from the direct, overwhelming and corrupting influence of the specific forbidden knowledge that had nearly led to its utter ruin. The Great Flood thus stands as a solemn, terrifying, yet ultimately hopeful reminder in these ancient texts that while God's judgment against persistent, unrepentant evil is certain and just, His mercy endures, and His ultimate purpose is always towards healing, restoration, and the preservation of a path towards redemption for those who will walk humbly with Him. The groaning earth was about to receive a drastic, cleansing baptism. The story of the Watchers, their illicit descent, the forbidden knowledge they imparted, and the subsequent divine judgment of the Great Flood is far more than just an archaic, mythological tale confined to the dusty pages of apocryphal literature. It is a narrative that reverberates with a profound, almost primal resonance, a timeless allegory that echoes through the corridors of human history and continues to speak with unsettling relevance to the deepest recesses of the human psyche, even in our modern, technologically saturated age. In the Book of Enoch, the dramatic fall of these celestial beings and the ensuing corruption of humanity serve as a potent, archetypal reminder of the ever-present dangers of unchecked pride, the seductive allure of unbridled ambition, and the perilous intoxication that often accompanies the acquisition of knowledge or power that was never meant to be ours, or that we are not yet spiritually or morally equipped to handle. These ancient lessons are not bound to a specific antediluvian epoch. They resonate with an enduring, often uncomfortable familiarity, as much today as they did in the shadow-haunted days leading up to Noah's Ark. The specific categories of forbidden knowledge imparted by the Watchers, the mastery of technology, symbolized by metallurgy and weapon-making, the ability to wage sophisticated warfare, the arcane arts of enchantments and sorcery, and the perceived power to manipulate nature or divine destiny, may, at first glance, seem like relics of a primitive, superstitious ancient world, far removed from our enlightened scientific era. Yet, if we peer beneath the surface of these ancient symbols, we find that humanity, in every generation, still faces remarkably similar, deeply ingrained temptations. We are still driven, often unconsciously, by a profound, innate desire to control our environment, to dominate circumstances, to overcome our perceived limitations, and, perhaps most pervasively, to place our ultimate faith in our own burgeoning understanding, our own technological prowess, and our own self-devised solutions, rather than in the gentle, often counterintuitive, guidance of a loving, sovereign God. The Bible, in its canonical wisdom, offers a clear and consistent counter-narrative to this human tendency towards self-deification. The timeless words of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, serve as a foundational spiritual compass. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. This resonant call to place our ultimate trust in God's perfect wisdom, rather than in the fluctuating, often flawed landscape of our own limited human understanding, has never been more urgently relevant than it is today. In an age characterized by unprecedented technological advancement and an almost idolatrous faith in human ingenuity, the Watcher's story, with its tragic consequences, serves as a stark, ancient illustration of what happens when humanity chooses to lean decisively on its own understanding, especially when that understanding is fueled by knowledge acquired outside the framework of divine sanction and ethical responsibility. This ancient narrative forcefully reminds us that there are indeed boundaries, moral, spiritual, and perhaps even intellectual, that we are not meant to cavalierly cross, not because God seeks to arbitrarily withhold good things from us or to keep us in a state of perpetual infancy, but precisely because He, in His infinite love and foreknowledge, seeks to protect us. He understands, far better than we do, our inherent fragilities, our propensity towards pride, and our limited capacity to wield immense power without succumbing to its corrupting influence. The relentless pursuit of knowledge purely for its own sake, especially when it involves the ambition to manipulate or dominate the natural and spiritual realms, or to unlock powers that promise godlike capabilities, often leads to a dangerous erosion of humility, a diminishing of reverence for the Creator, and a loss of perspective regarding our proper place within the vast, intricate tapestry of creation. Humanity, when it overreaches in this way, is left perilously vulnerable, often unable to foresee or comprehend the devastating long-term consequences of wielding immense power without the indispensable accompaniments of true wisdom, selfless love, and profound moral responsibility. The dramatic imprisonment of the Watchers, as vividly described in the Book of Enoch and strikingly echoed in the New Testament in Jude verse 6, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day, serves as a chilling cosmic object lesson. It demonstrates with irrefutable clarity that even celestial beings of immense original power and lofty station are ultimately accountable to God's immutable moral order and his sovereign universal design. Their rebellion, born of desire and pride, and its devastating cascading impact on fledgling humanity, stand as a lasting, somber testimony to God's unwavering justice and the critical importance of the limits he places, not as arbitrary restrictions, but as benevolent safeguards for our ultimate protection and well-being. When we, whether as individuals or as a collective species, willfully step outside of God's loving design, when we seek power or knowledge through forbidden or unethical means, we inevitably expose ourselves to profound spiritual and moral dangers that have the insidious capacity to corrupt not only our individual souls, but also the very fabric of our societies, leading to discord, injustice, and eventual collapse. Today, in the 21st century, the haunting legacy of the Watchers urges us to engage in a deep, honest, and often uncomfortable reflection on our complex relationship with knowledge, power, and faith. As we continue to push the boundaries of scientific discovery, to develop technologies of almost unimaginable capability, and to grapple with ethical dilemmas of unprecedented complexity, we are constantly reminded of the critical importance of aligning our pursuits, our ambitions, and our innovations with the timeless principles of God's revealed will and his overarching moral framework. The story of the Watchers stands as an ancient, weathered beacon, a solemn warning cautioning us to consistently choose the pursuit of true, life-giving wisdom over the intoxicating allure of raw, unbridled power, to cultivate deep, heartfelt humility over the seductive whispers of self-aggrandizing ambition, and to place our ultimate, unwavering trust in the goodness and sovereignty of God, rather than in the fluctuating, often deceptive, promises of self-reliance or technological salvation. Consider the ethical frontiers we currently navigate. The development of artificial intelligence with its potential for both immense good and terrifying misuse. The advancements in genetic engineering that promise to eradicate disease but also raise profound questions about the very definition of human identity. The creation of weapons of mass destruction capable of annihilating civilization in an instant. In each of these arenas, and countless others, the ancient echoes of the Watcher's temptation resonate. Will we, like early humanity, grasp for knowledge and power without adequate consideration for the moral and spiritual guardrails? Will we prioritize progress over prudence, capability over character? Or will we learn from the tragic missteps of that antediluvian age, seeking to integrate our intellectual pursuits with a deep and abiding reverence for the Creator, a profound respect for the sanctity of life, and an unwavering commitment to use our knowledge for the genuine flourishing of all, rather than for selfish gain or destructive ends? The choice, as it was for Adam and Eve in the garden, and for humanity in the days of Enoch, remains starkly before us. The allure of forbidden power, the whisper that we can be as gods, is an ancient, persistent, and ever-present temptation. The story of the Watchers is not just their story. In a profound and unsettling way, it is also our story, a mirror reflecting our own deepest vulnerabilities and our most critical choices. In a world grappling with the dizzying acceleration of knowledge and the ever-expanding frontiers of technological power, a world that often equates intellectual prowess with ultimate wisdom, the teachings of Jesus Christ offer a profoundly countercultural and deeply insightful perspective. As we reflect on the sobering narrative of the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, a tale of celestial beings who, through pride and illicit desire, shared knowledge that ultimately corrupted rather than enlightened, the words of Jesus resonate with an even greater poignancy, offering an alternative pathway to true understanding and spiritual flourishing. He consistently pointed away from the relentless human pursuit of hidden powers or self-aggrandizing control over creation, and towards a simpler, yet far more profound foundation: a childlike trust and humble dependence upon God. Consider the moment, recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 25, when Jesus, in a moment of profound communion with his Father, offered a prayer of thanksgiving that cuts to the very heart of this divine economy of wisdom. At that time, Jesus said, "I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do." This remarkable statement, uttered by the very embodiment of divine wisdom, turns conventional human notions of intellectual hierarchy completely on their head. It suggests that the deepest, most transformative truths of God's kingdom are often veiled from those who rely solely on their own intellectual acuity, their academic achievements, or their sophisticated understanding of the world, the wise and learned, in a purely secular or self-reliant sense. Instead, these sacred, life-giving realities are more readily, more joyfully revealed to those who approach God with the unpretentious simplicity, the trusting openness, and the humble dependence of little children. This is not an endorsement of ignorance or a denigration of intellectual pursuit. Rather, it is a profound commentary on the posture of the heart required to receive divine revelation. The wise and learned from whom these truths are often hidden are typically those whose wisdom is rooted in worldly systems, whose learning has led to intellectual pride, or whose understanding is divorced from a reverent acknowledgement of a transcendent creator. They are perhaps akin to those in Enoch's time, who eagerly grasped the forbidden knowledge offered by the Watchers, believing their newfound intellectual and technical capabilities made them self-sufficient, even godlike. Their wisdom became a barrier rather than a bridge to true spiritual insight, because it lacked the essential ingredient of humility. In contrast, the little children, to whom God is pleased to reveal his truths, are those who possess a spirit of teachability, an awareness of their own limitations, and an unfeigned willingness to trust and depend on a power and wisdom greater than their own. A child, in its ideal state, does not approach the world with cynicism or a pretense of knowing all the answers. They are open, receptive, and naturally inclined to trust those who lovingly care for them. It is this very quality of humble, trusting receptivity that Jesus suggests unlocks the gateways to understanding the profound mysteries of God's character and his kingdom. True wisdom in this divine paradigm is not about amassing vast quantities of information or mastering complex intellectual systems. It is about cultivating a heart that is soft, open, and yielded to the Spirit of God. The story of the Watchers, as chronicled in the Book of Enoch, provides a stark ancient counterpoint to this call for childlike humility. The Watchers themselves, beings of immense original wisdom and celestial power, fell precisely because of pride and a misplaced desire. They sought to elevate humanity and perhaps themselves, through means unsanctioned by God, believing their understanding surpassed the divine plan. Humanity, in turn, corrupted by the knowledge they received, also succumbed to pride, believing they could navigate the complexities of existence and wield cosmic powers without reference to their Creator. The result was not enlightenment, but a catastrophic descent into moral chaos and spiritual darkness. They pursued a wisdom that was ultimately foolishness, a power that was ultimately self-destructive, because it was divorced from the foundational principles of humility, obedience, and loving dependence on God. Jesus' life and teachings consistently modeled and called for this childlike faith. He urged his disciples to become like little children if they wished to enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. He received children when his disciples tried to turn them away, declaring that the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Mark 10:14. This was not a call to intellectual regression or naive simplicity, but an invitation to embrace a radical humility, a complete reliance on the Father's goodness, and a willingness to receive truth with an open, unpretentious heart. In an age like ours, where information is available at an unprecedented scale, where scientific and technological advancements occur at a dizzying pace, and where human capability seems almost limitless, the temptation towards intellectual pride and self-reliance is perhaps greater than ever. We can easily fall into the trap of believing that our sophisticated models, our complex algorithms, and our ever-expanding databanks hold the ultimate answers to life's deepest questions. We risk becoming the wise and learned from whom the most profound spiritual truths remain hidden, simply because we have ceased to approach the mystery of existence with the awe, wonder, and humble dependence of a child. The legacy of the Watchers, therefore, serves not just as a warning against specific forbidden practices, but as a broader caution against the spirit that undergirded their rebellion and humanity's subsequent fall, a spirit of self-exaltation, a desire for unsanctioned power, and a rejection of divine limits. True wisdom, the kind that leads to life, flourishing, and genuine communion with God, is not found in the relentless, prideful pursuit of hidden knowledge or the arrogant assertion of control over creation. It is discovered, often unexpectedly, in the quiet posture of a childlike heart, a heart that trusts implicitly in the goodness of the Father, that acknowledges its own limitations, and that joyfully receives the revelations of God, not as a means to power, but as an invitation to deeper love and more faithful obedience. As we navigate the complexities of the modern world, with all its technological marvels and intellectual challenges, the ancient call to childlike faith, so beautifully articulated by Jesus, remains our surest guide, our safest harbor, and our most direct path to the heart of God. It is in this vulnerable, trusting space that the most dangerous and alluring forms of forbidden knowledge lose their power, and the gentle, life-giving wisdom of God can truly take root and flourish. As our exploration of the Watchers and forbidden knowledge concludes, we see a timeless truth. God's boundaries are an expression of his protective love, guiding us towards true wisdom found not in illicit power, but in a humble relationship with our Creator. The teachings of Jesus illuminate this path, revealing that genuine strength lies in sacrificial love and obedience to his kingdom principles. This journey from ancient warnings to the hope of Christ's message is ongoing. We've delved into the core of what it means to follow him, understanding that his most dangerous teaching is actually the most liberating, an invitation to a transformed life through surrender and embrace of his eternal kingdom. If these explorations into the depths of Scripture and the transformative power of Jesus' teachings resonate with you, and you desire to continue uncovering these vital truths, we invite you to become part of our community. Please subscribe to our channel, Jesus and Tomorrow, to stay connected for more insightful content. Don't forget to like this video and share it with others who are seeking understanding and hope. We also welcome your reflections in the comments below. How do these ancient lessons and the teachings of Christ speak to your life today? Thank you for joining us. May you walk in His light and truth today and into all your tomorrows.